I'm Alison Buckenterrell. I'm a producer at The Agenda with Steve Paikin at TVO. This year, The Agenda is a contributor to a special series, Learning in 2030, where we are discussing the impact of technology on how we learn and what the future of education will look like. Next Wednesday, February 20th, we will air the next program in this special series, where we will be discussing gamification and education. Will the combination of education and gaming encourage children to embrace learning? I'm joined now by Jeremy Friedberg. He is a co-founder and partner at Spongelab Interactive, a Toronto-based company that develops educational games. Welcome, Jeremy. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, I was wondering if maybe we can start and you can just briefly explain to me the concept of gamification and relate it to the field of education.
Gamification it's a word that's thrown around a lot in a variety of different industries, and it's often horribly misunderstood. And we have our own sort of take on what gamification means. And to simplify it in a way, when it comes to creating structures, in our case, to educate people, gamification is really part of the overall design and creating a game. And we break it down into two fundamental components: what we call the simulation. And then the layer that goes around that, we call the gamification of it, the gamification of that simulation. To just give you a sense of this, the simulation is what we create. It's the core that a user will engage with. It's in the case of a computer game, it could be this world that you're interacting with. In the case of a non-computer game, chess is a great example. The board, the players, that's the simulation. If it's soccer, it's the pitch, it's the players, the rules work together to put the ball in the net. The gamification is the design that goes around the simulation that is there to encourage and motivate users to engage with the game and to change their behavior, to come back, to feel rewarded for what they're doing. And it's a very delicate process to do it really well. And ultimately, it's understanding that fine balance between intrinsic and extrinsic reward systems that is really very, very much tailored to the user themselves.
And I should just note that if you heard a little bit of noise, you'd mentioned to me earlier that they were doing some drilling at your office today, so we should just let people watching at home know that that's what they might be hearing in the background.
Yes, it's not me.
Exactly. And I just wanted to follow up. So you mentioned incentives and extrinsic and intrinsic rewards, and I'm wondering if maybe you can expand on that and give us some examples.
So like an intrinsic reward is something that you get out of doing what you're doing. It's a very personal and deep connection. It's something that's rewarding to you specifically. Whereas an extrinsic reward would be, I'm doing this, but the reward is what I get after doing this. So it's not connected to what I'm doing right now. And there's utility for both of those things. And I think it's understanding that fine balance.
Can you give us some examples of what you've been working on?
In terms of games or in terms of, what we do at Spongelab, we do a variety of things, but we create game content. But we also create platforms to deliver game content into learning frameworks, whether it's professional education or it's the mainstream education system. Bringing an educational game into a learning environment is a complex process. It needs to function with a whole variety of other technologies, different things that people are doing, and really integrate in a meaningful way. And so we develop both those content, but we also develop how to actually use the content in an effective way.
Mm-hmm. Can you give me an example maybe of a game that you guys have created and sort of the educational attributes of that game?
Yeah, sure. One of our most popular games that we've created is called The History of Biology. It's not very well named, partly because of a marketing department of myself, but it's a game that was designed to from an education perspective, bring together a variety of different things that never been brought together before. So it brings together both biology, chemistry, physics, engineering, but also brings into the fold of the story political issues, social issues, the ethics in science, and delivers that content through a very unique game framework that is connected to the people, their discoveries in the world that they live in. From a game framework perspective, it's kind of built like a web scavenger hunt. So there's things that users do inside the game themselves, but then they have to solve these problems, and to do it, they have to go out onto the internet and do their own research. And what they come across with online are real websites, like government websites, museum websites, fake websites we've planted, like auction houses, art galleries, and even real websites that are hosting fake content for the game. And so it's this blended reality experience, all built around getting users to solve these very complex problems, but tied to these storylines, these rich storylines about the history of who these people were, and the work they did, the tools they invented, and how it all comes together.
And we've set up a little video here that gives a kind of a flavor of that game. So maybe we'll just we'll do a quick share our screen so that we can show people a little bit about what this game is about. Okay, here we go. There we go. Okay, well that looks like a really cool game. I have to tell you, after you and I first talked, I played around with it a little bit, and I have to tell you, I found it a little bit difficult. I got stumped at maybe the third puzzle or so, so it's really interesting that you've created that.
Well, thank you. We spent a lot of time in terms of the design about looking at how users use it, who are they, where are they, what kind of technology are they using, and how might they be working together. And so the game can be played in multiple different ways. You could sit down and play it all the way through, and some people do, but we really envisioned it to be short engagements played repeatedly over a long period of time. So it actually parallels with things that students are doing in classes, but also designed to be very collaborative. So yeah, some of the missions are challenging, but we want them to be challenging so that you work together. And we also, what's built in the engine of that game is something rather unique in the educational game space, is that you create a game like this that's beautifully crafted, as you can see, but someone posts a walkthrough of it and the game's spoiled. In this particular game, the content is continuously randomized so that no one experience in the game is exactly like the other, so that users actually have to work through the missions on their own. And we've actually we've done studies in looking at the differences between collaborative engagements with the game versus solitary engagement, and we see some really powerful things happening in that respect.
Now, you mentioned having some idea of who is playing the game and what they're using. Is this something that people are using in an educational environment in a traditional kind of classroom?
We have users all across the board. So we have people in formal education settings using the game, and we have people in the general public who just like the game because it's pretty, it's cool. It's got a really interesting and compelling storyline that's actually following scientific things that are happening in the real world right now, and the game sort of ends in just the near future, and it deals with some pretty compelling ethical issues and scientific issues, and people, I think, really get attached to that. But yeah, it's been really across the board who uses it.
And I'm wondering if you can kind of tell us why you think that gamification has such potential in terms of learning.
It's when I look at gamification, I mean, game-based learning and using games to communicate, there's already been 50 years of research on why this is a powerful way to teach. And all you have to do is look at why we use games to train pilots. And it's not about teaching, learn all this stuff and be able to regurgitate to me. It's about, can we both teach and assess things like critical thinking and creativity? When we're training pilots, as an example, they are, you really want to know is, how is this mind going to perform under these very stressful situations? But creativity and critical thinking are some of the most important skills that one needs to master in their life. And so games have this ability to both teach and assess these things over long periods of time. They're incredibly compelling in that respect. Gamification is looking at, how do we get those people to do this on their own? So in the case of training pilots, you are telling them to go to this simulator. You have to use this training tool. And they're designed very well to get them engaged in the tool. But in education, you may be left to your own devices to actually engage with this content. This is what gamification is looking at, is what is the reward system in place that makes me want to care about this? And people talk a lot about gamification in education and look at, well, we'll just throw some badges and slap points and everything and we're going to be great and off to the races. But it doesn't work like that. Human beings are much more complex and everybody has different needs. But it's important to recognize that the education system is already gamified. You have to engage with this structure. At the end of it, you will get this point, this letter as your point. And you have to learn the system to actually get that point. And it keeps going on. One can argue is that if education is already like a game and using those kinds of reward structures, is it a good game? Was it designed properly for the audience? And to look at what we've done in terms of in the game community, in terms of how people react to certain things, like a point. If you play a game, you spend all this time getting to this point and you lost, and you didn't get anything for it, it actually is not motivating you to re-engage. But, game designers have come up with this concept of experience. You played this thing, you may have failed in your task, but you still got all the experience points that went with it. And I think that's a very valuable concept that, when you're learning, when you fail at something, when you try something and it doesn't work, you learn an immense amount of what you're doing. It's one of the most important learning tools is the concept of failure. Yet we have nothing in our educational structure that really is there to incent and reward failure. It's no different when we look at research. As a graduate student at the University of Guelph, me and a couple of colleagues, we always used to joke, we would get together and talk about our failures, and we always wanted to publish the Journal of Unpublishable Results. That it's a great learning experience. Yet, if we were be able to put in a structure that rewarded and incentive the process and not the end goal, I think we can really change the way students engage with the system in a much more meaningful way.
So let's look ahead. This is all about sort of looking to the future and trying to predict what we see coming. So let's look sort of 10 to 15 years down the road. What do you see in educational gaming? What do you see happening at that point?
In terms of educational gaming in the school systems or just in general? Because,
it could be both.
I think educational gaming is already here and it's quite prevalent. And I think it's also important to note that there's many games that are already out there that people call commercial games that have huge amounts of learning that's going on inside of them. What's of a value in that learning is really a matter of perspective. It's very subjective. So, games like, Age of Empires have immense amounts of real history in them. It can be an educational tool. So in terms of informal settings, they're already there and quite compelling. In professional communities, we're there, and it's going to become more place. I mean, what started in training pilots is now how we train oil rig workers, doctors and surgeons, just, even bank tellers, like the idea of using games to simulate how two people can interact with each other and how to navigate problems. So it's already there. Bringing them into the education space is going to be a little bit more of a challenge. And I think we're, as designers, we're waiting to for some policy changes to we're basing things on this metric, this very simple metric that we assess, how people are doing. If we can get our heads around, changing that metric to looking at the process of what students create, how they change through their time in this education structure, I think games will become a main place. One of the most important reasons for that is that, yes, games are fun and engaging, but what games do really well is they are data capturing tools, some of the most impressive data gathering tools we've ever had. And what that does is gives us immense amount of information about how students learn, their behaviors, their needs, how to support them. And the data generating is going to be able to allow us to do something we've never been able to do before, is to tailor the learning experience to the individual in a very meaningful way. We're all individuals. We all learn in our own unique little ways. And that's, I think, what games will have to offer. But we won't get there until the institution can start put in a mechanism to allow that to be an assessment tool, that we're going to go beyond just a number or a grade and look at the process.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jeremy. I really appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And I just want to make a note that if you're interested in seeing more of our Learning 2030 coverage, you can go to our website, which is theagenda.tvo.org. I'm Alison Buckenterrell, and thank you so much for joining us.